Okay. איתמר וג'נין, אתם שם?
כן, אני עכשיו אשים את
וידאו.
מה קורה?
מצוין. זה מצוין. אני צריך שתפעיל את הוידאו שלכם, מעולה, יופי. זהו.
Hi, Netta.
Hi, Karen, how are you?
I'm good.
I'm glad to hear. זהו, אז יש לנו מצטרפים מוקדם. את צריכה להגיד לי שוב איך להגיד את השם שלך נכון. אני אמרתי את זה נכון?
את יכולה להגיד ג'נינה,
ג'נינה.
ככה אני אומרת לחברים שלי ישראלים להגיד, אבל באנגלית בדרך כלל אומרים ג'נין.
ג'נין,
משהו
אוקיי.
כזה.
אוקיי.
לא משנה.
אוקיי. בסדר. אבל איך הדרך אני יכולה להגיד ג'נינה?
את יכולה לקרוא לי ג'ה. זה יותר פשוט.
איי, לא. זה בסדר. אז...
לא, באמת. כל החברים שלי קוראים לי ככה.
אוקיי. Hi, Abba. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Nice to see you again.
Good. So
We gotta start meeting.
we have two other people speaking this time, so it won't be only my voice you're hearing, so that's good. אוקיי, אז יש איזה מילים, משהו שבא לכם לעבור עליו לפני שנתחיל?
משהו שקופץ עליו.
אוקיי, סבבה. ג'נינה, הווידאו שלך קצת קטוע, אבל פשוט תוודאי שהווי-פיי סבבה, ונסתדר. אני שומעת אותך טוב, אז הכל בסדר.
את מצליחה לשמוע אותי? טוב?
כן, כן.
אז נראה לי זה פשוט התאורה.
אוקיי.
כן.
אתם צריכים לשתף את המסך שלכם משהו כזה, או שאתם רק תספרו?
לא הכנתי שום דבר.
לא, בסדר, הכל טוב.
כן, גם אני לא.
לא, הכל בסדר. סתם רציתי לדעת. אוקיי. יפה, אז אנחנו... אני שתצטרפו עכשיו... אני מקליטה. This is part of a series called My IDF Service, which the idea is it's up until Israel's Memorial Day. And the idea is that former soldiers each week will be sharing their experiences and stories. And that way, we're able to do something in honor of Israel's Memorial Day rather than other ideas that were planned before the whole Corona thing took place. Last week, me and my sister Avia spoke about our service in the IDF spokespersons unit, and I'm happy to send the recording to anyone who wasn't here and is interested in hearing about that. And this week, we have Janine and Melo and Itamar Assaf, who will be sharing about their combat experiences. Janine, so we also call her Ja, if you just make it easier, because she moved from Brazil, so it has a unique name that not many of us have a difficulty saying. So I'll just explain, first of all, regarding combat service in the IDF, and then I'll let them share their experiences, because I had a very clear office job and not combat whatsoever. So in the IDF, it's divided between men and women. Women who want to go into combat volunteer, and they can only go into specific combat units that are co-ed. And Janina here was in the first one that opened, called Karakal. Since then, there have been two more co-ed battalions that have opened, Arayot HaYarden, and another one that I cannot remember its name. So if you guys remember, please feel free to jump in. And Bardelas, thank you, correct. So there's 3 co-ed battalions. And but for men, it's different. If you have a profile that you are fit to go into combat unit, then you will be, then you're put into a combat unit, basically. And then there's certain, and then you have to go through certain training or certain physical tests in order to, if you want to be in a more elite combat unit. So basically, if you are a man and you have the physical ability to be in a combat unit, you'll be put into a combat unit. Whereas women have to actually volunteer and say that they would like to be in a combat unit. It's important to note also that it's not you just go into combat and then you're immediately fighting, terrorists or whatnot. You have training for a long period of time. You have 3 or 4 months of basic training, and then you have what's called advanced training for about a few more months. So for about 6 or 7 months, you're in training to be a combat unit, and until you get the color beret that's of your unit, and then you only start actually being the soldier from the specific unit you are. So both Janine and Itamar will share their experiences and how they got into the unit they were in, but it's just important to remember the general background of how it is for men and women, and also the training they go through before they actually begin their position. So with that, if anybody has any questions, I'll just say please write it in the chat, and then I will refer to it at the end. Itamar is going to start sharing about his experiences, giving us a few examples, sharing about how he got to this position, and then Janina will do the same. And again, if you have any questions during, just write it, and then we'll refer to it at the end. So thank you very much. And also, I'll just note that I know both of them from different places in my life. Itamar was a fellow counselor in a program called Onward Israel. I was with a group called Arts and Culture, and he was with a Boston group, but we were both in Jerusalem, so that's how we met. And Janina studied with me international relations at Hebrew University. So it's nice to bring people who I know into my shlichut. So I really think it's a great opportunity to kind of share the experience and bring more people in and bring more Israelis to you guys. So thank you. So Itamar, feel free to take the lead and share your experiences.
So hey everybody, as Nata said, my name is Itamar Assaf. I currently live in Beersheba. I am 24 years old. I just started my studies this year. I'm learning electrical engineering. And so I'll just jump right into my military service. So I started my service after a long process of sorting. I was sorting to be a pilot, and after a long process, I was accepted to the pilot course, and I started my way there. My sorting includes, as Neta said before, a lot of exams. I was asked to come back and take further exams each step I took on the way, and at the end, we had to do 1 week in field that had a lot of very intensive physical and kind of like team work and checkings, kind of things like ODT kind of stuff that checked my ability to be in the pilot course. After all of that, I was recruited at the beginning of 2014. And I remember that my first day was a bit of a shock, and there was a lot of emotions. Of course, all of my family was there. My ex-girlfriend was there. So there was a lot of emotions. It felt like one big mess, just like jumping into like buses with people you don't know, with like people who's might be a year older than me, screaming at me to get on the bus and making sure that I'm like starting my process and the way it should start. And from there, we were driven to the Bakum. It's in Ramat Gan, right? Where's the Bakum? Yeah, Ramat Gan.
Tel HaShomer, so which is
Tel
near
HaShomer.
Tel Aviv, yeah.
Near Tel Aviv, and that's where all of my becoming a soldier started. So at the pilot course, I started with studying. The pilot course is 3 years long. You start with like further sorting, which takes 6 months, but because there's not enough people to sort you and not enough time, you have to start the process of studying for the university, because at the end of the 3 years, you also get a degree. So for the first 2 months of my military service, I was actually a student. It was a very different experience from what I'm experiencing right now as a student. It includes like going for a trip at the middle of the night for 20 kilometers and then waking up at 7 a.m. in the morning and start studying maths and physics and some military history about Israel and all those kind of things. After the end of 2 months, I started my what they called checks, and those are like our first flights which are actually tests. Each flight is a test, and you just jump into the plane. The first test, you pilot the plane for the first time. Actually, you have a more experienced pilot next to you, sitting next to you, who is control of all of the situation, and you just like jump into the water and start. And I remember it was very intensive. I remember it was very hard because being a pilot is so much more complex than what I was expecting. And just to soar up, you would have to do like 5 different things at the same time, and you would have to remember all of that. And actually, I have a funny story about that. Neta asked me to give some personal stories. So I remember at, I think, something like the 7 or 8 flight, when you have a bit more confidence, actually, it's like still the beginning for you, but for them, it's right in the middle. And so you have one, how do you say it? Like one, I don't know how to say it.
You can say it
like
in Hebrew, then I can help.
Kind of like a drill.
Okay.
It's kind of like a drill that you have to do, that you need to turn in 90 degrees. And because the plane can't really turn in 90 degrees, and you would have to soar up and then kind of like fall on the wing, on the right wing. And you have to pick a certain road or something to make sure that you align to it, to make sure that you're actually doing a 90 degrees. And it was like something of like 30 things at the same time, like one after the other, things to do to make sure that you do the exercise right. And at the very end, I forgot to lift the nose of the plane up. And I just realized that I'm flying toward a truck, and the truck driver is looking up to me, and I'm like on the plane, and I'm looking down to him, and I figure out that something is like terribly wrong. So I pick up the nose of the plane very hard, and I just remember all of my face just like pulling down, and like 4G, it was 4 or 5G on my body, all of my blood like raining down from my head. And I just remember like I finished 1,000 feet below the necessary height. So that was actually really funny, because I was like, oh, oops, just like one little thing that I didn't do right, and I finished in a different place. So I remember that after these 15 flights, maybe because of this certain flight that I just told you about, I was flunked out. They decided that my piloting level wasn't high enough. And I decided to go to the Armored Corps, which I have done the rest of my military service. That was about after 4 months I was in the military. So I remember I went to the Armored Corps, and I had to start all of the process from the beginning, just through basic trainings and all of the basic things that you have to do to become a soldier. It includes a lot of like going to the field, learning how to use your weapon, learning how to shoot as a team, how to shoot at targets by yourself. And that process takes 4 months. And after the basic trainings, you continue to advanced trainings, in which you actually learn how to be a tank soldier, and each one in his own position. In the tank, you actually have 4 people. You have the commander, you have the loader, you have the gunner, and you have the driver. So each one gets a position and learns how to do so. And then later on, we learn how to do it as a team, so we can go to the lines and act as active soldiers in line. So I started my way as a loader, and it includes a lot of like loading and big missiles into the tank cannon, and a lot of physical activity. I guess they picked me because I was like tall, and they picked the bigger people to do so, because they want someone who can load fast. So I've done that for 4 months. And after that, I went straight to the commander course, which takes also 4 months. And after only 1 year in the Armored Corps, I was actually a soldier. I was actually a commander for the first time. which is crazy because I had the opportunity to talk to tank commanders in the US actually, and they told me that it takes something like 7 years to become a tank commander. And I felt like I have all of this responsibility after only 1 year in the army. And so I felt like it was a really good feeling for me. I liked the responsibility. I felt like I'm doing something productive with my life. I felt like I'm being challenged each and every day in my life. When you're in that, you're just like waiting for the week to end so you can go back to your family, or actually the 3 weeks to end, because I would go back home only once in 3 weeks. But like looking back, it was one of my best experiences in my life. So I started as a commander at advanced trainings, and I stayed there for a year as a commander. I remember for the first time that I had to command a big exercise with another platoon. It was with the Nachal. It's Raglim, infantries, right? So it was with the infantries, it was the Nachal. And I remember it was a big training, and I remember I told my gunner, infantries, they really like to do a big scene about what they're doing, but we as armored corps, I don't want to like disrespect the infantries or anything like that, but we feel like we have a lot of more firepower in our hands. We have guns and machine guns, and we have the cannon, and we have missiles, and we have a lot of things in the tank that a whole platoon maybe holds together. So I would tell my gunner, they would put like balloons on their target, the infantries, to make sure that they hit their shots. So I told my gunner, you better not leave them even one balloon alive because I want them to get there, and we would get all of the balloons by ourselves. So we actually shot down all of their targets, and by the time they got to their targets, there was nothing left to shoot. It was very funny. And at the very end of the exercise, that's another story. I remember that we finished our really long exercises. It was something like 4 hours when you're like in your tank, driving over, shooting targets, making sure to cooperate with the other unit. And at the very end, it was like 3 or 4 in the night. We had to go back to the base. So, of course, the infantry decides to take their soldiers first before us. And it took so long. It took like 2 hours maybe. And I decided to let my crew get their rest and fall asleep. And I said, I'm responsible enough to stay awake and make sure when it all ends to go back by myself with the tank. And from one thing led to the other, and I fell sound asleep. No one could wake me up. And I remember my company commander is trying to call me on the walkie-talkie, and he just can't wake me up. So they figured my communication must have broken down or something, and they went back by themselves. And when they got back, they realized I wasn't there with them. So my platoon commander had to walk all the way to my tank. He was so angry, he climbed on the tank, kicked me in the head. I was with a Hamlet, of course, but he kicked me in the head and just walked away. So I woke up to this kick in the head, and now I realized that I fell asleep, and I realized it was my commander. And I got really stressed up. I thought I might get a punishment, like we say to get a Shabbat, like a Bel Shabbat. It's when you're supposed to go back home for Shabbat, but you don't because you messed up with something. So I went back as quickly as I could, and they just decided to overlook this thing. So I was very grateful. But it was a story I tell until this day. At the end of my service, I was kind of like more of an education commander, which means that you take the commander who has more experience, and he's in charge of training the commanders in training. And the commanders that comes to us to advanced trainings, they probably just came from the from the commander course. So they know the basics, but they've never actually had the opportunity to command soldiers, real soldiers. So they need a lot of guidance, and that's where my position came in place. I was there to make sure they're doing all of their trainings right, that they learn how to talk to their soldiers, how to train them, how to make them better soldiers. I would sit up top in this tower, which usually be a hill. It would be out in the middle of nowhere. And I would be with like my goggles, looking at them with my radio and telling them what to do. So that was the end of my service. Overall, in my service, I was a direct commander of something like 12 or 15 soldiers. Overall, I commanded, I believe, more than 150 soldiers who were in my company while I was a commander in my company. That's pretty much it. I finished my military service at March of 2017. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you. If anybody has any questions regarding anything that Itamar said, just feel free to write it in the chat or leave it till the end. And now we'll go to Janine or Ja, whatever you prefer, and she'll tell her story as well.
Okay, so my name is Janine. I am a Brazilian. I'm also Israeli and also Brazilian. I came to Israel when I was 15 years old. And I decided to join the army after I came in here and studied in some place with other people that came from Brazil, Argentina, and Latin America in generally. I studied in a Jewish school, and all my life I received a Zionist and Jewish education. So when I got here, it was really natural for me to want to join the army and defend my country. And when I started to think about the units that I wanted to be part of, I wanted specifically to be a combat soldier in an infantry battalion. And at my time in 2012, there were only 2 battalions in the infantry that would receive women. Ockets, which is a unit that the soldiers work with dogs, and Caracal. So I chose Caracal. The Caracal battalion is a battalion that acts specifically in the Egyptian border, although today I know they are also doing operations in the West Bank, but they didn't when I was in the army at the time. I got in March 2012. First, I did an 8-month boot camp where I learned how to use my weapon, how to run faster, how to succeed to do all the operations with a vest full of munition. And also, of course, during this time, I learned a lot about Israeli history, the IDF history, the ethics of the Israeli army, and etc. And by the end of the boot camp, I was sent to a course, which by the end of it, I was ready to be a sergeant. So I received a squad with 10 soldiers. I trained them to become warriors, like I was trained before then. And then we were sent to the Egyptian border. The Caracal battalion at my time, also today, it acts specifically in the Egyptian border. And for 4 months, we did a lot of operations in there, mostly patrols along the border. And the main things we had to deal with were drug dealers who would come from the desert of the Sinai and try to smuggle the drugs to our side. And in fact, this specific border is known for all the criminal transactions that drug dealers try to do. But also it is a very dangerous zone, not only because it is near the Gaza Strip, but also because for many years, especially in my days, We had to be prepared to deal with ISIS, also the Islamic Jihad that until today operates there. So it was very, really great to be there for 3 years. After 4 months being the border, I was sent by my officer to do another course for commanders, but this time for sergeants, but this time by the end of it, I had become a senior sergeant. What this means? It means that being a senior sergeant, it's someone that is in charge of a platoon aside the commander of the platoon. And if there is need, I could replace my commander in any task that someone would ask to do. In summary, I was responsible for the logistic of my platoon, for the shooting training, usually also for the fitness trainings, and all their qualifications, really. That is what I did for the last final year of my. I decided to bring one specifically story that from one operation that I did during my time in the army. So I told you that I did a course, a senior sergeant course for 4 months with people from many units from the army, from the infantry part of the army. This story happened in May 2014. A few months before the war we had, before the protective edge, right, Neta? Yeah,
Yes,
from the protective edge. Yeah, it was a war we had in August 2014. And in May 2014, before this war, 3 young boys from the West Bank, 3 Jewish young boys, were kidnapped by the Hamas. I remember it took only a few hours until all the army was up on their feet, and all my platoon and all my company was sent to the West Bank to search for those boys. And not only as a lot of units were in the West Bank searching them in the main Palestinian cities. And along the way, we also did some operations to put pressure on under the Hamas and make them say to the army where those boys were. We didn't know if they were dead or not at the time, so we searched for them in hope that they would be alive. And one of those operations that I was part of was held in Shechem. It's called in English, I think, Nablus. It's in the north part of the West Bank. I also forgot to tell you that I was the only woman of the company. Because it was a special course, I was the only one sent from the Caracal battalion, and I had this really big and great opportunity to be not only the representative of my battalion, but also to prove that women can do those kind of operations that in my time only men would do. So one of the nights we were in the West Bank in Nablus, me and my platoon were sent to a Palestinian house, not to search for the boys, but to search for Hamas money. What does it mean? It means that this family that we were going to get inside their house, they had a boy, they had a son that in 2001 made a suicide bomb attack in Haifa. Usually, after someone does a terrorist attack in the name of the Hamas pays the family a certain quantity of money every month. It's like a salary. So we were sent to this house to search for the money and take it and pass it to the Palestinian Authority so they could use this money to build hospitals, build schools, and in general build infrastructure for the Palestinians. So when we got to the house, we started searching for the money. and we were about 20 people. And besides me and my platoon, we had 2 other people, a man and a woman, which I don't really remember why they were there and for which unit they came from. But if I'm not wrong, they were the ones responsible to take the money and pass it to the Palestinian Authority. So we were there for about an hour and a half, and we couldn't find this money. We had no idea where it could be, so we searched everywhere, in the rooms, in the closets, in the kitchens, inside the pots. And after what I remember being a really long time, my officer came to me and said, "Listen, Janine, we are not finding the money. And we are starting to suspect that before we came into the house, these women, there were 3 of them, take this money and held it under their veils. The army prohibits soldiers, men soldiers, to do a searching in women unless there is a certainty that they are hiding bombs or something really dangerous under their veils, which wasn't our case. Our case was money, so they couldn't be near the women. So he said to me, because you are a woman, you can do it. So I answered him, okay, I can take them to the room and do a search. And when they told the women they would come with me to the next room and I would do the search for the money, they started to do like a really big mess, saying no, 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 and other things in Arabic that I couldn't understand at the time. And suddenly they said, "We will show you where the money is." So we went with them to the closet, the same closet that we already searched for the money inside. And in the top shelf, they took like a piece of wood that we didn't see and took a folder from inside. And inside this folder, there was a lot of money, also dollars and also Jordanian money that sometimes they use in the West Bank. And what I most remember about this night was that inside this folder, there was a picture of the suicide boy, a picture of him with his gun, a Kalashnikov gun. And there were some things written in Arabic, which I didn't know at the time. And there were two numbers. The date that he made the suicide attack, it was in 2001 in Haifa. And there was another number in there, the number 14. So when I asked the translator, what is this number? He told me that it was the number of the people who were killed in his bomb attack in a bus in Haifa. And I remember that I looked at the picture and I said to myself, if I wasn't there as a woman, maybe we couldn't find this money and pass it to the Palestinian Authority. And I was really happy for being there and doing this kind of operation. And I know that today women from the Caracal Battalion are doing this kind of operation in the West Bank. And I like to think that because people like me were sent to these courses and did this kind of job, the army finally understand that women can also contribute to the defense of the army, not only in one border, but in all the borders that there is. You want another story?
If you have another one, feel free to share, because we do have a little bit more of time. So if you have another story, that would be great, because each person is supposed to say 2 stories. So you can, if you have another one, feel free to share it. Yeah.
I have one more story. When I finished this course and after the Protective Edge operation, I was with my battalion, with my company in the Egyptian border. And I remember that I went to my patrol. I did all days patrol and sometimes special operations. And we started the patrol at the middle of the night. And by 12 a.m., we knew that we could return to the base and to switch shifts with another platoon from the company. And we were waiting for the soldiers to come and switch places with us. And then we start to listen in the radio. It's an expression in the Israeli army. It's called hot hammer. Hot hammer, patish ham in Hebrew. It's a code which means that someone is being attacked. And it was the first time that in the middle of the day, I listened to these words. Usually at night, we have things going on, not in the middle of the day. And it turned out to be that in the company, a neighbor of mine in the Egyptian border, they had drug dealers coming. And when they tried to take the drugs and pass to our side, to the people that were waiting for them, the Caracal unit that was in charge of this area came and saw them. And when they tried to take the drugs instead of the drug dealers, they started to shoot. And from one thing that it was only meant to be like a interception of drugs, it started to be like a big fight. There were, I think, something like 20 or 30 drug dealers, not only with guns, but also with missiles. And I remember that when we started to listening to this hot hammer code, we came into the hammers, into our cars. We drove in there. We started to shoot back. And then a lot of helicopters came two helicopters came from our part, from our Israeli side, and they dropped bombs and they killed all the drug dealers. But until they got to come, two soldiers, one officer and one soldier, they got injured and they had to be taken to the hospital. And I think it was like a really big thing I was part of, and also all the battalion was part of. And I remember it being in all the newspaper over the country. And for the first time, the Caracal battalion was in the news. Was like, there were women in there, there were men in there, they were fighting together, and they finished this fight, and they could do it. So maybe it's time to think about opening more battalions for women, maybe in other parts of in other units, not only in the infantry. And yes, it was a big deal.
Thank you so much for sharing. I enjoyed. I was fascinated to hear their stories as well, because even though I was in the IDF spokesperson's unit and sharing these kinds of stories, hearing it up close and personal that somebody's sharing these experiences is definitely different. So I will now open it to questions, because I don't see the people sent in the chat. But if you guys don't have questions, then I'll ask a few of my own that I have. But please feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions to either Itamar, to Janine, or to both, about their experiences or about general being in combat in the IDF. So I'll just start with a question first of all, and feel free to jump in and ask questions. What is the biggest challenge in your opinion of being in a combat unit? and it could be from any aspect, but challenges that you have had being specifically in a combat unit. And that's to be said, I mean, well, you take it whatever the way you want to take it. And it's for both of you. Yeah.
I remember that first, the main two things that were really hard for me, it was not having too many hours to sleep. I had like 3-4 hours at night to sleep well, and not being able to shower for like days. Yeah, we were like going to an operation, coming back to base, eat to something, and then go in another operation, and we didn't have time to breathe, shower, and sleep. It was really not simple at first.
So I can relate to what Judge just said. I would say it furthermore about everything. It's not just about sleeping hours. It's also about your time. I was in advanced training. I was a commander in advanced training my whole service, almost all of it. And I just remembered that you would have so much to do and so many chores to do that I wouldn't even have time to eat sometimes. And so I would either skip lunch or I would just like grab something really fast and would eat like in 5 minutes. And I think that period of my life taught me how to eat fast. I've never eaten so fast before. But I think that beside that, I think that the hardest thing and I think the best thing about my service is that you learn how to face your like the things that you do, the consequences of your deeds. If you've done something wrong and you said something wrong to the soldier, you might even get a punishment for something that you did. And to be the bigger man and to say, okay, this was my fault, and I will take the punishment, I will take the responsibility for it. It's something that is really hard, and to see somebody having a really bad day because a bad choice you've made, and thinking in hindsight that you could have done it differently, I think it was very hard in some cases. I remember one of my soldiers got a Shabbat because of him misunderstanding something. And I wasn't there to protect him from getting the Shabbat, but I remember I felt really bad after it happened. So yeah.
Good, thank you. I really interested. I wouldn't have thought of, so I appreciate. So we have 2 questions now. So someone asked for Janine, how you were treated by your male peers, and I guess maybe generally also how were women treated in Karakal or by other men in infantry and combat?
When I was in Karakal, I was treated really good. I didn't feel at first that there was a difference between me and the other men that were training. There were soldiers that would say gross things or like, you can do it, why are you even trying? But usually those are the weakest ones. Then they were also the ones that didn't even finish the boot camp. So it was like, okay, go to another place and let me do the work. But I remember when I was at the senior sergeant course, it was really, really difficult for me because I was the only woman there. And all the time I would like receive these, it was not really bad things that they would say to me, but it would be like some jokes or sayings that would make me feel uncomfortable. And it was those were 4 months that I was thinking, or either I finish this now and go back to my battalion without becoming a senior sergeant, or I need to learn how to be myself, how to not listen to what they are saying, just do what I have to do and finish and let them see what what one woman can do, even when they are trying to make me not to do it. So there was these 4 months that they were really difficult for me, but in general, I think it was okay.
Okay, good, great. So we have 2 more questions now, and I think that if anyone has any more questions, please write them down now, because I think we'll have time just for these 2 more questions. What were your most scariest moments during your service? Or I guess you can choose one moment that was scary in your eyes. Yeah.
You want to start, Jay?
Okay. I think the most scariest moment was the second story that I told you, because it was the first time that I felt what it was like, someone shooting at you, like in front of you. And although I was 2 kilometers from those drug dealers, but it was the first time, so it was scary.
I would have to say that the most scariest moment for me. Well, I actually never been like in a person like in combat. I've never shot anybody. Nobody ever shot me. I did get to hold some lines in a few cases. The main reason for that because I was in advanced training. But I remember that one time we were in a Tapuach intersection, if you know that. It's a very hot spot in Israel. Once in a while you hear about attacks on soldiers there, a lot of terrorist attacks, some stabbing and stuff like that. And I remember that all my platoon was there and I had to join them. I don't remember where I was, but I just remember that I had to join them, and I caught a bus and I was on the bus and I just like, I went on there. I was like the only Israeli there, probably. I was with my uniforms, with my gun in my hands, and all of the eyes were on me. And I knew that that was one of the most dangerous places to be by yourself as a soldier, probably in Israel. And I just wouldn't sit down. I just stood up at the entrance of the bus with my clips inside of my weapon, which you're not supposed to be, but I felt like it was necessary. And I just felt very threatened. And I just remember it was very scary. I didn't want to sit down because I just thought about somebody jumping on me from the back, maybe trying to kill me, maybe trying to grab my weapon or something like that. And so, yeah, that's probably must be it.
Thank you. And the last question is, did you travel after your military service? And I'll add, where, if you so, where did you travel to?
Okay, so I'll start. Actually, yeah, I traveled right away after I finished my military service. I started my SATs for a couple of months, and then right after that, I went to do a summer camp in the US. I was in Pennsylvania, in the Capital Camps, if anybody knows it. So I started my journey there for 2 months. After that, I went to South America for another 8 months. I was traveling all by myself. I went back to Israel for another 4 months to work, and then I went to Southeast Asia for another couple of months. So I took like 1 year of traveling, pretty much. I had a lot of ups and downs. I always thought after I finished my military service that there's not going to be any experience like that in my life, and that would build me up as a person, that would teach me so much. And I was absolutely wrong. Traveling was much, I don't know if much, but it was just as much as the military service as an experience for me. I got injured, I got bitten by dogs. I've got to do a lot of really good things as well, a lot of walking and trekking and meeting a lot of new people and learning about new cultures. I fell in love with the American people and the American Jewish people. And I met a lot of South Americans, a lot of people from Asia. I've got a lot of close friends all around the world. So yeah, it was a really important experience for me.
I didn't travel as much as long. I did a 2-month trip to Brazil and Argentina. I went to visit my family and I did a little bit of traveling alone. But then I came back and started to study in the university.
Say, I did the same thing, so don't worry. I didn't even travel at all. So thank you so much. I personally really enjoyed hearing your experiences, and I'm recording it too. So we're probably going to be sending this to smaller communities and the people who weren't able to join us now. I'll just, as I said in the beginning, this is part of a series. So the next installment of the series is on Monday, and I'm be focusing on the IDF Medical Corps. So there'll be 2 people, a woman, female and male, one who was a paramedic for a combat unit, female paramedic combat, and the other one who was a an instructor of of paramedics in the Army. Both of these people are not from a medical background. And again, they're 18-year-olds, so just to hear about their experiences during the Army and things that they've had to face during their service. And so that's on Monday. And I just wanted to say thank you to both Itamar and Janine, and just remind you that they were in this position, you know, from between probably 18 to 22, around that age more or less. We're not talking about people who are in their late 20s even. We're talking about people who are right out of high school and do this job and face going to Palestinians home, taking money, and facing, you know, being in an airplane, almost going into a truck. You know, these are experiences that I think 18-year-olds in the U.S. did not experience. So just to give perspective of these stories that I just told you, and remind you that these are people they were really young. They happened a few years ago. We're now in our mid-20s. So that's it. Thank you so much for joining us today. And
Thank you, everyone.
And
Thank you.
wishing safe and health to everyone. And thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys. Bye.